I used to hide my work until it was perfect. Drafts stayed private, photos unpublished, projects incomplete for months. I had a folder on my computer labeled "Maybe Someday" with over 3,000 photos that never saw daylight because they weren't quite right. Then I learned about a Japanese approach that completely changed my understanding of productivity and creativity itself. In the West, we're obsessed with the end result, the polished product, the perfect launch, the flawless Instagram grid. We treat our messy middle work like something to be ashamed of, like showing someone your rough draft is somehow unprofessional, unserious, amateur. I see this all the time in photography. People take hundreds of shots but only share the one perfect image. They hide the learning, the experiments, the near misses. But there's a Japanese productivity practice rooted in wabi-sabi that does the exact opposite. And the fascinating part, modern psychological research proves why this ancient approach actually works better for our well-being, our creativity, and our output. Hi, I'm Josh, and welcome to Shizen Style, where we often dive deep into Japanese aesthetics, creativity, and well-being. This approach doesn't really have a direct Japanese translation that matches how we use iteration in English, but it's deeply embedded in the wabi-sabi mindset, specifically the idea of wabi-sabi, combined with mikansei-bi, which means the beauty of incompleteness. So wabi-sabi is finding beauty in imperfection, impermanence, and incompleteness. And mikansei-bi is the beauty of incompleteness. The practice is simple in concept, but radical in execution. Intentionally share and celebrate unfinished work. Release things when they're rough around the edges. Make continuous, small improvements instead of waiting for some mythical perfect moment. You're not launching a final product. You're honoring the process itself. You're making visible the invisible work that usually gets erased from the final presentation. And nowadays, with everything having to be so polished and everything so glamorous on Instagram, it's great to see the behind the scenes. Just like kintsugi treats a broken bowl's golden repairs as its most beautiful feature, this approach treats visible flaws as markers of growth and authenticity. Think about traditional Japanese pottery. The potter's fingerprints left in the clay aren't mistakes to be smoothed away. They're signatures of the human hand. Evidence that a person, not a machine, made this thing. Now, this isn't just philosophical. There's solid research backing why this works. Harvard professor Teresa Amabile spent decades studying what actually motivates people at work. Her research revealed something she calls the progress principle. Amabile and her team analyzed over 12,000 daily diary entries from 238 people working on creative projects in 7 different companies. This was painstaking research, tracking the same people day after day, recording their emotions, motivations, and perceptions. The number one factor for positive inner work was progress. And they found that the single most important factor in maintaining motivation, creativity, and well-being wasn't hitting the final goal, getting recognition, or even achieving work-life balance. It was making visible progress, even in small ways, on meaningful work. She writes that when people see themselves moving forward, when they can point to concrete progress, they experience better mood, stronger intrinsic motivation, and more positive perceptions of their work and team. Here's what this looked like in the actual research. In one of the diary entries, a programmer from a high-tech company wrote about her day. She hadn't finished her project. She hadn't solved the complete problem. But she had finally discovered why something wasn't working as she expected. She considered it a minor milestone, just figuring out the why behind a bug. Nothing to show anyone. Nothing done. But in her diary entry, she reported experiencing positive emotions, strong motivation, and favorable perceptions of her work environment. The day felt successful, even though to an outside observer, she had no completed code, no finished product. That's the power of visible progress. Small wins, events that might seem minor, accounted for 28% of the days participants considered good days in the study. And what's more, small wins matter just as much as big breakthroughs, sometimes more. Amabile found that the effect of a small win on mood and motivation was significant and consistent. But interestingly, the negative effect of a setback was even stronger, particularly when people couldn't see any progress to balance against that setback. The problem is, when we hide our work until it's done, we rob ourselves of seeing that progress. We lose those small wins. We miss the daily evidence that we're moving forward. We're essentially erasing the exact thing that would keep us motivated, creative, and mentally healthy. So how do you actually practice this? Let me show you what this looks like in my own work, particularly in photography. When I'm working on photography, I used to wait until I had the perfect edited shot. I'd take somewhere like 200 photos in a session when I'm out, doing some landscape photography, and share probably one, maybe two. Now I tend to share multiple attempts in the series, the ones that didn't quite work, and more of the behind the scenes shots. The overexposed experiment, the slightly off composition that taught me something. Here's a recent example. I was trying to capture the bamboo in the famous Arashiyama bamboo forest in Kyoto. The first shot, the composition is off, just a little too busy and cluttered. I mean, there's a lot of bamboo around, so trying to make it uncluttered is a difficult task, but it taught me where I needed to position myself. The second one, a little better composition, but I lost the quality of light that I wanted. But now I knew I needed to shoot maybe a little earlier. This is the one that worked, but only because of everything I learned from the ones that failed previously. And you know what? When I share all the images, people respond more than when I just share the final image. Because they see the thinking, they see the problem solving, the human process. With these videos, I used to script every word, record sections 10 minutes, agonize over transitions. Now I embrace a more natural flow. Some stumbles stay in, some thoughts are half-formed. That's the real process of thinking out loud. I still often use a script because I like to have the main ideas formulated and the facts I dig up in the research phase. But I still like to leave some breathing room and space here and there for when new, relevant ideas pop into my head. In Japanese creative culture, this is everywhere once you start looking for it. Ceramic artists leave thumbprints in clay, not by accident, but intentionally. It's called the teato, or traces of hands. Calligraphers embrace the natural variation in brushstrokes. The moments where ink pools or runs dry aren't corrected. They're part of the character's life, its breath. Gardens are designed to show seasonal change and decay, not frozen perfection. Dead leaves in autumn aren't cleaned away immediately. They're part of the beauty. And if you want to go deep into seasonal Japanese gardens, I have the perfect book for you. Even in traditional architecture, you'll see support beams with the natural curve of the tree still visible. They didn't try to make the wood perfectly straight. The tree's growth history becomes part of the building's story. Often it's a local piece of wood from a tree not too far away, and all of this builds the story. The process is part of the story. The imperfections are proof of human hands, human effort, human learning. And if you want to go deeper into this practice, specifically through photography, check out my course, Master the Quiet Lens. It's a journey into wabi-sabi photography where we practice seeing and capturing imperfect beauty, including exercises on sharing your process and finding your authentic voice through the lens. Here's where this connects to wellness and inner work, which is really the heart of everything I explore on this channel. When you're constantly withholding your work, waiting for perfection, you're essentially telling yourself, what I'm doing right now isn't good enough. I'm not good enough yet. That's exhausting. It's a recipe for creative paralysis, imposter syndrome, and eventually burnout. I experienced this firsthand. There were months where I didn't create anything because I was so worried about it being perfect. The irony is that by not creating, I wasn't getting any better. I was stuck. But when you shift to celebrating the unfinished, you're practicing radical acceptance. You're saying, this is where I am in the journey, and that's valuable. This messy middle is worth honoring. Amabile's research showed that when people could see their daily progress, they reported better inner work life, better emotions, stronger motivation, more positive perceptions of their colleagues and their work. But there's another story from her research that illustrates this beautifully. She studied a chemical engineer, let's call her Sarah, who was working on a complex formula. For weeks, Sarah documented failed attempts, each one teaching her something but not producing the results she needed. Then one day she had a breakthrough. But here's what's interesting. In her diary entries leading up to that breakthrough, Sarah was consistently positive, engaged, and motivated. She saw each failure as progress because she was learning what didn't work and why. Compare that to another participant who only measured success as problem solved or not solved. That person's diary entries during a similar period of trial and error were increasingly negative, frustrated, and demotivated, even though objectively they were making the same kind of progress as Sarah. The difference wasn't the work itself. It was the ability to see and value incremental progress. The Japanese approach of embracing imperfection gives you permission to see that progress every single day. It reframes failed attempts as necessary iterations. It makes the invisible work visible. There's something profound happening when you practice this approach consistently. The research backs this up. In Amabile's study, on 76% of what people considered their best days at work, they had experienced some form of progress, even small progress. But on their worst days, 67% involved setbacks, and crucially, these were days where progress wasn't visible or acknowledged. You start to see that the Western productivity model, the one focused solely on outcomes and final products, creates a strange disconnection. You're always living in the future, always working towards some completed version that doesn't exist yet. The Japanese approach brings you into the present, because the work you're doing right now, imperfect as it is, actually matters. It counts. It's real. And the science confirms what Japanese culture has known for centuries. The process itself has value. The incomplete has beauty. The journey matters as much as the destination. This is why it connects so deeply with wabi-sabi philosophy. Wabi-sabi isn't just an aesthetic. It's a way of being in the world that accepts impermanence, imperfection, and incompleteness as fundamental truths. Nothing is ever finished. Everything is always in process. Even a completed photograph will fade with time. Even a published video will become outdated. Even a master craftsperson's work bears the marks of human limitation. And that's not a problem to be solved. That's the nature of existence. When you embrace imperfect iteration, you're not just adopting a productivity technique. You're aligning your creative practice with a deeper truth about how life actually works. You're making peace with impermanence. You're finding beauty in the transient, the incomplete, the still emerging. And paradoxically, that acceptance is what allows you to keep creating, because you're not burdened by the impossible weight of perfection. The Western productivity culture wants you to believe that only finished work counts, that only the polished version matters, that you should hide the scaffolding and pretend the building just appeared fully formed. But the Japanese approach, backed by decades of research from people like Teresa Amabile, shows us something different. Progress matters. The journey matters. The messy, imperfect, human process of making something matters. Maybe it's time we stop hiding our work until it's perfect and start honoring the beauty of where we are right now. I'd love to see what unfinished work you decide to share this week. Tag me on Instagram or leave a comment below. If you want more on Japanese aesthetics, wellness, and finding beauty in the everyday, subscribe to my newsletter, Shizen Style Weekly, as well as this channel. And watch this next video of mine to go deeper into Japanese aesthetics and developing your creativity.